Don't talk. Virgin teen saved mountain man at his cabin after seeing something shocking. A lonely mountain cabin, a storm raging outside. And then, out of the snow, stumbles a terrified young girl. She whispers only 2 words. Don't talk. The grizzled mountain man who saves her thinks it's just another runaway. But when riders come searching, the truth begins to rattle the very walls of his cabin. This girl saw something buried in the night, something powerful men will kill to keep hidden. Whiskey-soaked uncles, crooked lawmen, crates of rifles meant for a secret war. And in the middle of it all, a broken soldier forced to choose between silence and salvation. Every step closer to the truth could cost them their lives. Every whispered prayer might be their last. Can a forgotten man find redemption by protecting the one soul who trusts him? Or will the shocking secret she carries ignite a fire no one can put out? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The bitter Colorado wind howled through the pines, driving pellets of snow against Dale Boone's weathered cabin. Inside, the old trapper stood at his rough-hewn table, the lamp's golden light casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. His calloused hands moved mechanically, chopping dried vegetables for his evening stew. "Lord, if you're listening," Dale muttered, the words feeling strange on his tongue after so many silent years. He paused, knife hovering over a wrinkled carrot. The rest of the prayer died unspoken, like so many before it. The cabin's familiar scents surrounded him. Wood smoke from the stone fireplace, leather from his trapline gear, and the sharp tang of pine sap seeping from the logs. These smells had been his only company since settling in these heights, far from the memories that haunted the lowlands. Dale stirred the pot, hanging over the flames, watching the broth swirl. The wooden spoon moved slow and steady, like the rhythm of his solitary days. Steam rose in lazy curls, carrying the simple aroma of rabbit meat and root vegetables. "Reckon that'll do," he said to the empty room, his voice rough from disuse. The sound of it seemed to disappear into the storm's rage outside. He had just settled onto his 3-legged stool, bowl in hand, when he heard it, a faint scratching at the door, so soft he might have missed it, if not for years of training his ears to catch the whisper of animal movement in the brush. Dale set his bowl aside and reached for the shotgun that never strayed far from his reach. The scratching came again, weaker this time, not the sharp scrape of bear claws or the confident rap of human knuckles, but something else entirely. His boots crossed the floor in 4 long strides. The iron handle was cold under his fingers as he pulled the heavy door open, shotgun ready. Wind and snow rushed in, momentarily blinding him. There, crumpled in a heap against his doorstep, lay a small figure nearly buried in the white drifts. Dale's heart jumped to his throat as he made out the shape of a girl, no more than 15 or 16 years old, her clothes crusted with ice, and her face pale as the snow itself. "Lord Almighty," he breathed, propping his shotgun against the wall. Without hesitation, he scooped the girl into his arms. She was light, too light, and cold as death itself. He kicked the door shut behind them and carried her to his cot by the fire. His hands shook as he wrapped her in every blanket he owned. First his worn quilt, then the thick bear fur he'd tanned himself, and finally his spare wool blanket. The girl didn't stir as he worked, her breathing shallow but present. Dale's mind raced as he stoked the fire higher, adding precious logs from his winter store. No one lived within 20 miles of his cabin. How had she gotten here? What was she running from? The questions gnawed at him as he heated broth in a tin cup. The girl's face was young but drawn, dark circles beneath her eyes speaking of exhaustion beyond her years. Her clothes, though now soaked through, were of good quality, not the rough homespun of a farmer's daughter. Her boots were city-made leather, not meant for mountain travel. As Dale held the cup of warm broth to her blue-tinged lips, her eyelids fluttered. Deep brown eyes, glazed with fever and fear, fixed on his face for just a moment. "Don't talk," she whispered, the words barely a breath. Then her eyes slid shut again, her head lolling against the rough pillow. Dale sat back on his heels, troubled by those two simple words. They carried weight. A warning, perhaps, or a plea. Either way, they hinted at danger following close behind. He settled into his chair, shotgun across his lap, and prepared for a long night's watch. The fire crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on the cabin walls. Outside, the storm showed no sign of letting up, its fury rattling the shutters and driving snow through every tiny crack in the logs. As the hours crept by, Dale studied the girl's hands where they lay atop the blankets. The fingers were red and swollen, the early stages of frostbite. She'd been out in the cold far too long. But more telling were the fresh scrapes across her palms and the dirt beneath her broken nails. She'd been climbing, crawling, fighting her way through rough country. Sometimes she muttered in her fevered sleep, words too quiet to make out, but her face would twist in fear and her hands would clutch at the blankets. Dale found himself leaning forward during these moments, straining to catch any clue about what had driven her to his door. The lamp burned low as midnight approached, its flame flickering as the oil ran dry. Dale didn't dare light another. His winter supplies were carefully measured, with no allowance for unexpected guests. Instead, he let the firelight guide his watch, adding logs sparingly to keep the warmth steady. His thoughts drifted to another winter night, years ago, when he'd kept similar vigil beside 3 small beds. His children's faces rose in his memory, flushed with fever, fighting for every breath as the influenza took them, one by one. Their mother had followed soon after, leaving Dale alone with his grief and guilt. He shook his head, forcing the memories away. This girl wasn't his to save, wasn't his responsibility at all. Come morning, he'd need to figure out what to do with her. The nearest town was 2 days' hard ride in good weather, and with this storm. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending up a shower of sparks. The girl whimpered in her sleep, a sound of pure terror that cut straight through Dale's carefully built walls. Without thinking, he reached out and patted her hand awkwardly, the way he used to comfort his youngest during thunderstorms. "You're safe here," he said gruffly, though she couldn't hear him. The words felt like a promise, one he wasn't sure he could keep. The storm raged on through the darkest hours, snow piling higher against the cabin walls. Dale's vigil continued, his weathered face illuminated by the dying fire as he watched over the mysterious girl who had literally fallen at his doorstep. Her occasional frightened mutterings and the visible terror in her fever dreams told him all he needed to know. She was running from something, or someone, and her fear was real enough to drive her into the deadly winter mountains alone. As the first gray light of dawn began to seep through the frost-covered windows, Dale found himself confronting an uncomfortable truth. After years of keeping the world at arm's length, of speaking to no one but God, and rarely even to him, his solitary existence had been irrevocably disrupted. Whatever had brought this girl to his door, whatever danger might be following her tracks, he was now involved, whether he wanted to be or not. The morning sun crept through frost-rimmed windows, casting weak light across the cabin's rough-hewn floor. Dale had dozed off in his chair, shotgun still balanced across his knees. He woke with a start at the sound of rustling blankets. The girl was awake, her eyes wide with panic as she struggled to free herself from the nest of covers. Her movements were frantic, uncoordinated, like a trapped animal fighting for escape. "Easy now," Dale said, keeping his voice soft and steady. He set the shotgun aside slowly, making sure she saw him do it. "You're safe here." She froze at his voice, then tried to stand. Her legs buckled immediately, and she would have fallen if Dale hadn't caught her arm. She flinched at his touch, but didn't pull away. "You've got frostbite in your feet," he explained, easing her back onto the cot. "Won't kill you, but you need to stay warm and rest." The girl's eyes darted between him and the door, measuring the distance. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. "Name's Dale Boone," he offered. "Found you, half frozen on my doorstep last night." She swallowed hard, licking cracked lips. "Miriam," she whispered. Miriam rose. Her voice was barely audible, rough from cold and fear. "Please, don't talk." Dale nodded, accepting her strange request without question. He'd learned long ago that some stories needed time to unfold. Instead of pressing her, he moved to the fireplace and began preparing breakfast. The familiar routine of morning chores filled the silence. Dale added wood to the banked coals, hung the iron pot over the flames, and measured out cornmeal for porridge. All the while, he felt Miriam's eyes following his every move. She had pulled the blankets tight around her shoulders, making herself small in the corner of the cot. The morning light revealed what darkness had hidden. Her face was young but drawn, with shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hard travel. Dale stirred the porridge carefully, adding a precious spoonful of molasses from his dwindling stores. The sweet smell filled the cabin, and he heard Miriam's stomach growl despite her obvious effort to stay quiet. When he handed her a bowl, she took it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she murmured, then fell silent again. The sun climbed higher, warming the cabin's walls. Dale busied himself with minor repairs, giving Miriam space while keeping her in sight. By midday, some color had returned to her cheeks, and she seemed steadier. "I ran away," she said suddenly, her voice startling in the quiet room. "From the mining camp near Eagle's Rest. From my uncle." Dale kept his expression neutral, though his jaw tightened at the way she spoke the word uncle. He'd seen the bruises circling her wrists, purple-black against her pale skin. They were the kind that came from struggling against someone's grip. "He's my guardian," she continued, twisting the blanket between her fingers. "Since Ma and Pa died." Then she pressed her lips together, as if she'd already said too much. Dale nodded, showing he'd heard without pushing for more. He knew something about loss, about the way it could leave you raw and vulnerable to those who'd take advantage. He'd seen too many mining camps where men's greed turned them cruel, especially to those weaker than themselves. The afternoon light was fading when Dale stepped outside to gather more firewood. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried under fresh snow. The air was crisp and still, carrying sound for miles across the white-draped mountains. When he returned, arms loaded with split logs, he found Miriam pressed against the wall beside the window, her face pale with terror. She held up a finger to her lips, then pointed down toward the trail that wound through the valley below. Dale set the wood down silently and moved to peer out. Through the trees, he caught glimpses of riders, 3 or 4 men on horseback, moving slow, searching. Even from this distance, he could see rifles slung across their backs. Miriam's breathing had gone shallow again, her whole body trembling. Dale stepped away from the window, positioning himself between her and the door without making it obvious. He busied himself with the fire, but kept his shotgun within easy reach. The riders passed without turning up the path to his cabin. Still, Miriam didn't relax until the sun had set, and darkness crept back into the valley. That evening, Dale served a simple supper of beans and the last of his cornbread. Miriam ate mechanically, her fork scraping against the tin plate in a rhythm that seemed to echo her nervous energy. The lamplight cast long shadows on the walls, making the cabin feel smaller, more confined. "I saw something," Miriam whispered finally, setting her empty plate aside. Her hands twisted in her lap. "Something awful. Something my uncle and Deputy Pike tried to hide." Dale leaned forward slightly, careful to keep his movements slow and unthreatening. "What did you see?" She shook her head sharply, dark curls falling across her face. "I can't. If you tell anyone," her voice cracked, "they'll kill us both." The lamp sputtered, its flame drawing low as the oil ran out. In the dimming light, Dale saw tears tracking down Miriam's cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, as if angry at her own weakness. "Nobody's killing anyone," Dale said firmly, though he knew better than to make promises he might not be able to keep. The mention of a corrupt deputy added layers of trouble to an already dangerous situation. Miriam pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, making herself small again. The firelight caught the bruises on her wrists, reminding Dale that whatever secret she carried, she'd already paid a price for knowing it. They sat in silence as the lamp finally went dark, leaving only the glow of the fireplace to hold back the night. Outside, an owl called once, its cry floating across the snow-hushed valley. Dale thought about the riders, about how long it would take them to circle back, about how many days' worth of supplies he had left. Miriam's words hung in the air between them. "They'll kill us both." The threat felt solid, real as the cabin walls and cold as the mountain wind. Dale had spent years building this solitary life, keeping the world and its troubles at arm's length. Now trouble had found him anyway, in the form of a frightened girl with a dangerous secret. He looked at Miriam, huddled in his dead wife's quilt, terror and exhaustion etched into her young face. She reminded him of his eldest daughter, of promises made and broken, of duties abandoned in grief. Perhaps this was God's way of offering him a chance at redemption, or at least at doing one right thing in a world gone wrong. The fire popped, sending up a shower of sparks. Miriam flinched at the sound, her eyes going to the window again, searching the darkness beyond. Dale added another log to the flames, letting the familiar task steady his thoughts. Whatever came next, whatever danger, approached with the dawn, he knew he couldn't turn her away. Dawn painted the snow-covered peaks in shades of rose and gold. Dale watched Miriam at the cabin window, her breath fogging the glass as she took in the pristine landscape. After 2 days indoors, he reckoned they both needed fresh air. "Care to help me gather kindling?" he asked, pulling on his worn leather gloves. Storm brought down plenty of dry branches. Miriam nodded, wrapping herself in the thick wool shawl Dale had found in an old trunk. It had belonged to his wife, Sarah, and seeing it worn again stirred memories he usually kept buried. The morning air bit sharp and clean. Their boots crunched through the fresh powder as Dale led them to a sheltered grove of pines. Miriam's hands, still tender from frostbite, trembled as she reached for the first branch. "Like this," Dale demonstrated, showing her how to test wood for dryness. "If it snaps clean, it'll burn true." He worked slowly, letting her mirror his movements. Smaller pieces catch easier. They worked in comfortable silence, broken only by the snap of wood and the whisper of wind through the pines. A jay called from somewhere above, and Miriam looked up, a brief smile touching her face. It was the first real smile Dale had seen from her. "My pa used to say blue jays were God's alarm clock," she said softly, then fell quiet again, as if surprised by her own words. Dale nodded, giving her space to speak or stay silent as she chose. They gathered kindling until their arms were full, then made their way back to the cabin. The physical work had brought color to Miriam's cheeks, and some of the haunted look had left her eyes. Inside, Dale set about preparing a simple stew with dried beef and the last of his root vegetables. The familiar routine seemed to ease something in Miriam. She sat at the rough-hewn table, watching the pot bubble over the fire. "My uncle," she began suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "He drinks. Bad. Trading post at Eagle's Rest keeps him supplied?" She twisted the shawl's fringe between her fingers. "Last week he tried to trade me. To the miners. For whiskey." Dale's hand tightened on the wooden spoon he was holding. He'd seen such things before. Girls younger than Miriam sold or traded like cattle. The memory of his own daughters, lost to fever years ago, made his chest ache. "I ran," Miriam continued, the words coming faster now. "But I got lost in the dark. Ended up near Indian Creek, where I wasn't supposed to be." She glanced at the window, as if expecting to see someone listening. "That's when I saw them, Uncle Silas and Deputy Pike. They were burying something in the creek bed." Dale ladled stew into tin bowls, setting one before Miriam. "What did you see?" "Rifles," she whispered. "Lots of them. New Winchester repeaters, still in their crates." Her spoon trembled against the bowl's rim. "I heard them talking. Deputy Pike said they'd blame the theft on the Utes. Said it would give them reason to drive them out, once and for all." Dale's stomach churned. He'd served in the army years ago, had helped force native families from their hunting grounds. The memory of children crying as their homes burned still haunted his dreams. "Please." Miriam grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "You can't tell anyone I'm here. They'll kill me to keep it quiet. Deputy Pike, he's got friends everywhere. Uncle Silas, too." "Nobody's going to harm you," Dale assured her, though he knew the promise might be hard to keep. Corrupt lawmen were more dangerous than any mountain cat or winter storm. They ate in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts. Dale considered their options, few as they were. The nearest honest law was 2 days' ride away, if the weather held, and winter in the high country was far from done with them. As evening descended, bringing with it heavy clouds that promised more snow, Dale heard the distant thunder of hoofbeats. Miriam heard them too, her face going pale as paper. "Quick now," Dale whispered, dousing the lamp. They pressed themselves against the cabin's back wall, where the windows couldn't betray their presence. Dale's shotgun lay across his knees, loaded but cold comfort against what waited outside. The riders drew closer, their voices carried clearly in the still air. "Miriam!" A man's voice, thick with drink and anger. "Come on out, girl. You're worrying your poor uncle sick." Another voice, smoother but no less menacing. "Just want to talk, Miriam. No harm done if you come quiet." Dale felt Miriam trembling beside him in the darkness. Her breath came in short, frightened gasps that she muffled against her sleeve. He reached out slowly, letting his hand rest on her shoulder, offering what comfort he could. The riders circled the cabin once, twice. Their horses' hooves kicked up snow against the walls. Dale held his breath, counting heartbeats, waiting for them to try the door. But something, providence or luck or the threatening weather, turned them away. They listened as the hoofbeats faded back down the trail. Only when silence returned did Dale feel Miriam's shoulders relax slightly under his hand. In the darkness, her whispered prayer filled the cabin. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." Her voice gained strength as she continued, the familiar words carrying her through her fear. "Yea, Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." Dale listened, struck by the simple faith in her words. How long had it been since he'd prayed with such trust? Since Sarah and the girls died, he'd turned his back on God, buried his grief in solitude and hard work. But hearing Miriam now, something long frozen began to thaw in his heart. When she finished, neither of them moved to relight the lamp. The darkness felt safer somehow. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady, covering the rider's tracks. "Thank you," Miriam whispered finally, "for not sending me away." Dale thought of the rifles hidden by Indian Creek, of corrupt men playing with people's lives, of old sins and new chances at redemption. "Get some rest," he said gently. "Tomorrow comes soon enough." He kept watch through the night, listening to Miriam's breathing even out in sleep, while the snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, a lone wolf called to its pack. The morning dawned cold and brittle. Dale pulled his wool coat tighter as he trudged through knee-deep snow, checking his trap line. Each breath clouded in front of him like pipe smoke. His thoughts wandered as he worked, methodically clearing snow from each trap and resetting the ones that had sprung empty. Near the creek bend, he found a rabbit caught clean, a mercy killing at least. As he knelt to free the creature, memories surfaced unbidden. He remembered another creek, years ago, where he'd knelt beside dying men. Young soldiers and warriors both, their blood staining snow just like this. The fighting had seemed right then, following orders to clear tribal lands. Now the weight of those choices pressed heavy on his conscience. "No more," he muttered, securing the rabbit to his belt. The crunch of his boots in snow marked a steady rhythm as he continued his rounds. "Won't be party to more killing." He thought of Thompson, his old cavalry friend, shot through trying to protect a Ute family from trigger-happy settlers, and Garcia, who died wondering why they were fighting people who only wanted to keep their homes. Good men, lost to bad causes. The sun climbed higher as Dale finished checking the last traps. He'd been gone longer than intended, but the quiet helped clear his mind. Whatever trouble lay ahead with Miriam's situation, he knew he couldn't stand aside this time. Those hidden rifles meant someone was planning bloodshed, and he'd seen enough of that to last 10 lifetimes. Approaching the cabin, Dale noticed smoke rising straight and true from the chimney. Through the window he caught glimpses of movement. His hand tensed on his rifle before remembering. Miriam. For so long he'd lived alone that having another soul in his space still startled him. Inside, he found the cabin transformed. The girl had found his old broom and swept every corner. His few dishes were washed and stacked neatly, the rough-hewn table scrubbed clean. Even his bedroll was tidied, blankets folded with careful precision. Miriam stood by the fireplace, stirring something that smelled of coffee and chicory. She turned at his entrance, cheeks flushed from work. "I hope you don't mind," she said softly. "Wanted to do something useful to thank you." Dale hung his coat and set about cleaning the rabbit. "Didn't have to do all this." "I like keeping busy." She poured coffee into his tin cup. "Helps me not think too much." They worked together in comfortable quiet, Dale preparing the rabbit while Miriam kneaded dough for biscuits. The familiar tasks seemed to ease something in both of them. As evening approached, they sat down to their simple supper. "This is real fine," Dale said, breaking open a steaming biscuit. "Been a while since I had proper bread." Miriam smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Used to help in the school kitchen before." She trailed off, pushing food around her plate. "I always thought maybe someday I'd be a teacher myself. Silly dream now, I suppose." "Ain't silly at all." Dale studied her across the table, This brave, broken child trying so hard to be strong. "You'll get your chance once we sort this trouble. My word on it." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me, for helping." The moment was broken by a flicker of light through the window. Dale rose slowly, moving to douse the lamp. In the sudden darkness, he could make out distant lanterns bobbing through the trees. 3, maybe 4 riders combing the hillside. "Quick now," he whispered, lifting the trap door to the root cellar. "Stay quiet as you can." Miriam descended the rough ladder without hesitation. Dale covered her with an old horse blanket, then replaced the floorboards. He checked that no light showed through the cracks before stepping outside. The night air bit sharp as he positioned himself by the woodpile, shotgun across his knees. Minutes crawled past like hours. Finally, hoofbeats approached, and 3 riders emerged from the shadows. Dale recognized Deputy Pike's voice before he could make out faces. "Evening, Boone," Pike called, reining up. "Sorry to trouble you so late." Dale kept his voice neutral. "No trouble. What brings you boys up this way?" "Looking for a runaway girl?" another rider said. Silas Rose, Miriam's uncle. His words slurred slightly. "My niece, 15. Dark hair. Seen anyone matching that description?" "Can't say that I have." Dale shifted his shotgun slightly, making sure they noticed it. "Don't get many visitors up here, especially not in winter." Pike dismounted, boots crunching in snow. "Mind if we look around? Girl's got some wild stories in her head, making accusations that could cause real trouble." "Rather you didn't," Dale said firmly. "Got my cabin just how I like it. Don't need strangers tracking snow through." "Now see here," Silas started, but Pike held up a hand. "Your property, your rules," the deputy said smoothly. "But if you do see her, send word right away. Girl needs help, proper guidance. You understand?" Dale met his gaze steadily. "I understand plenty." The threat hung unspoken in the air between them. Finally, Pike remounted. "Come on, boys. Mr. Boone wants his privacy." Dale watched until their lanterns disappeared into the darkness. Only then did he return inside, his hands shaking slightly as he lit the lamp. When he lifted the trap door, he found Miriam huddled in the corner, tears streaming down her face. "They're gone, now," he said gently. "You're safe." She scrambled up the ladder and threw herself into his arms, sobbing. "You lied for me. If they'd found out..." Her whole body trembled. "They would have killed you too." Dale held her awkwardly, unused to offering comfort after so many years alone. But something protective stirred in his chest, a feeling he thought had died with his daughters. "Don't ever leave me," Miriam whispered, clinging to him like a drowning person to driftwood. "Please." "Hush now," he murmured, patting her back gently. "Ain't going nowhere." Through the window, stars glittered cold and distant above the snow-covered peaks. Dale knew the choice he'd made tonight would have consequences. But for the first time in years, he felt something like purpose returning to his life. Whatever came next, he'd face it standing between this child and those who meant her harm. The days settled into a gentle rhythm at Dale's cabin. Winter's fierce grip loosened gradually, bringing moments of sunshine between snow flurries. Each morning, Dale woke to find Miriam already up, tending the fire or sweeping the rough wooden floors. Her presence filled the once empty spaces with quiet purpose. "Here now," Dale said one crisp morning, showing Miriam how to set a simple rabbit snare. "Loop needs to be just so about this high off the ground." His weathered hands demonstrated the motion, while Miriam watched intently. "Like this?" She copied his movements carefully, her young face scrunched in concentration. That's right. Dale nodded approval. You're a quick study. They checked the snares daily, Miriam's excitement obvious whenever they found success. Dale taught her to dress the rabbits too, though her hands trembled at first. Ain't pleasant work, he admitted, but necessary if you're to survive out here. Near the cabin, Dale showed her how to split wood properly. Mind your stance, he instructed, adjusting her grip on the axe handle. Let the weight do the work. Though the task left her arms aching, Miriam persisted until she could split a log clean through. Inside, during the long evenings, they worked together on an old quilt Dale had stored away. Miriam's nimble fingers proved better at the delicate stitching, while Dale's steady hands helped stretch the fabric true. My mama taught me this stitch, Miriam said softly one night, demonstrating the neat pattern. Said every quilt tells a story. Dale watched her work, remembering his wife Sarah bent over similar needlework, their daughters playing nearby. The memory ached less sharply now, softened somehow by Miriam's presence. As the days passed, Miriam's spirits lifted. She hummed while she worked, old hymns that filled the cabin with gentle melody. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound, she sang quietly, kneading bread dough one afternoon. That saved a wretch like me. Dale found himself listening more and more, the familiar tunes stirring something long dormant in his heart. One evening, as they sat by lamplight, Miriam pulled a small Bible from her dress pocket, worn and obviously well-loved. Would you like to hear my favorite verse? She asked hesitantly. Dale nodded, surprising himself. He hadn't opened a Bible since burying his family. The Lord is my shepherd, Miriam read softly. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Her clear voice gave the ancient words new life. Used to know that one, Dale said roughly. Long time ago? Miriam looked up at him. Did you have family once? Before? Dale was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with memory. Wife named Sarah. 2 girls, Mary and Beth. Fever took them. Winter of '73. He stared into the fire. Buried them and my faith both that day. Miriam's hand found his across the table. God doesn't leave us, she whispered, even when we leave him. Dale's fingers tightened briefly around hers. They sat in companionable silence as the fire crackled low. The peaceful routine was broken one afternoon by the jingle of horse bells. Dale tensed at the sound, but it was only Jim Watson, a familiar trader who made regular rounds through the mountain camps. Afternoon, Boone, Watson called, dismounting. His eyes widened slightly at seeing Miriam in the doorway, but he said nothing, following Dale inside. While Miriam prepared coffee, Watson shared news from town. Strange times, he said, warming his hands by the fire. Tensions building with the Ute. Some fool's been spreading tales about raids coming, got everyone spooked. Dale noticed Miriam's hands shake as she set down the coffee cups. Heard whispers about hidden guns, too, Watson continued, though nobody seems to know where they came from or who's behind it. He glanced between Dale and Miriam. Reckon there's truth to any of it? Can't say, Dale replied carefully. Been keeping to myself mostly. Watson nodded, knowing better than to press. He traded some coffee and sugar for Dale's furs, then took his leave. Watch yourself, Boone, he said quietly at the door. Storm's brewing, one way or another. After he'd gone, Miriam paced the cabin anxiously. It's starting, she said. Just like I feared. Once those rifles are found. She wrapped her arms around herself. There'll be killing, both sides, and Uncle Silas and Deputy Pike will make sure the Ute are blamed. Dale stood at the window, watching Watson's horse disappear into the trees. Been thinking on it, he said slowly. Know a preacher down in Silver Creek, Reverend Matthews. Good man, trusted by both settlers and Ute folk. If anyone can help prevent bloodshed, it's him. But how can we reach him? Miriam's voice shook. They're still looking for me, and you said yourself the spring mud makes the passes treacherous. We'll find a way. Dale turned to face her. Can't sit quiet while murder's being planned. Not this time. Miriam nodded, her young face set with determination, despite her fear. The late afternoon sun slanted through the window, casting long shadows across the cabin floor. Outside, a warm wind whispered of spring, but brought with it the scent of coming rain. The peaceful refuge they'd found couldn't last. Action was needed. And soon. Dale checked his rifle methodically, his movements precise and practiced. The weight of the decision settled around them both. After a week of healing and hope, danger could no longer be ignored. They had to risk everything to prevent the violence brewing in the shadows. We'll need to be careful, Dale said finally. Smart about how we do this. He looked at Miriam, seeing not the frightened girl who'd collapsed at his door, but a brave young woman willing to stand for what was right. You ready for what's coming? I'm ready, she replied softly. God didn't lead me here for nothing. Dale nodded, a hint of his old faith stirring in his chest. Together, they began to plan. The pale light of dawn crept over the mountain peaks as Dale led his old bay horse from the lean-to shelter behind his cabin. His movements were practiced and efficient as he tightened the saddle cinch and secured weathered leather saddlebags. Beside the horse, a sturdy pack mule stamped its hooves impatiently, already loaded with supplies for the journey ahead. Miriam emerged from the cabin wrapped in Dale's spare coat, which hung loose on her slight frame. Her small Bible was clutched tight against her chest, a source of comfort in the uncertain morning. The borrowed coat smelled of wood smoke and leather, reminding her of the safety she'd found in Dale's cabin. Safety they now had to leave behind. Ready? Dale asked quietly, checking the mule's lead rope one final time. Miriam nodded, though her fingers tightened around her Bible. Dale helped her mount the bay horse, then swung up behind her. The horse shifted under their combined weight, but Dale steadied it with experienced hands. They set out as the sun cleared the eastern ridge, following a narrow trail that wound down from Dale's highland cabin. The spring thaw had turned much of the path treacherous. What had been packed snow was now slick mud that sucked at the animals' hooves. Dale guided them carefully, letting the horse pick its way through the safest spots, while the pack mule followed dutifully behind. The morning wore on in relative silence, broken only by the creak of leather, the soft splash of hooves in mud, and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Around midday, they paused in a small clearing to rest the animals and share a simple meal of jerky and hard biscuits. How far to Silver Creek? Miriam asked, stretching her legs while Dale checked the horse's hooves for stones. 2 days, maybe 3 in this mud, he replied, frowning at the sky. Depends on the weather holding. Miriam watched him work for a moment, then gathered her courage to ask what had been on her mind all morning. What was it like? During the war, I mean? Dale's hand stilled on the horse's leg. He was quiet so long Miriam thought he wouldn't answer. Wasn't right, what we did, he finally said, his voice rough with memory. Burning lodges, driving folks from land that was rightfully theirs. Following orders don't make it less wrong. He straightened up, meeting Miriam's eyes. Saw women and children running from their homes in winter. Elders who couldn't travel fast enough. Some nights I still hear their crying. Miriam stepped closer, her young face full of compassion. God can forgive anything, she said softly. "Even the things we can't forgive ourselves for." Dale turned away, checking the mule's packs. "Ain't sure I deserve forgiveness." "That's not for us to decide," Miriam replied, touching his arm gently. "The Bible says his mercy is new every morning." They continued on through the afternoon, the trail growing steeper as it wound through a narrow valley. The spring mud made for slow going, and Dale kept a watchful eye on the threatening clouds gathering over the western peaks. As dusk approached, they made camp in a protected hollow beside a half-frozen creek. Dale tended to the animals while Miriam gathered dry wood for a small fire. The flames cast flickering shadows on their tired faces as they shared a meager supper of beans and coffee. Miriam hummed quietly as she wrapped herself in a wool blanket, an old hymn about grace and redemption. Dale recognized the tune from his childhood, memories of church pews and his mother's voice rising unbidden. Despite the danger they were in, an unexpected peace settled over him as he listened to Miriam's gentle humming. He positioned himself where he could watch both the trail and the creek crossing, his rifle close at hand. The night deepened around them, stars appearing one by one through breaks in the clouds. The fire burned low, reduced to glowing coals that offered little warmth, but less chance of being spotted. The peace shattered near midnight. Dale's head snapped up at the distant sound of hoofbeats. He moved swiftly, dousing what remained of the fire with dirt. "Behind that fallen log," he whispered urgently to Miriam, who was already scrambling to her feet. "Stay down and don't make a sound." Miriam pressed herself flat behind the massive log, her heart pounding as Dale took up position with his rifle. The hoofbeats grew louder, accompanied by the jingle of tack and low voices. Through gaps in the trees, a bobbing lantern approached along the trail they'd traveled earlier. Dale's finger rested steady on the trigger as the riders drew near. The lantern beam swept the woods, passing over their hiding place once, twice. Miriam held her breath, pressing her face against the rough bark of the log. The voices were close enough now to make out fragments of conversation. "Tracks leading this way. Too dark to tell. Check again at first light." The lantern light passed one final time, then began to recede as the riders moved on. Dale remained motionless until the sounds of their passage faded completely into the night. "They're looking for us," Miriam whispered, her voice barely audible. "Aye," Dale replied grimly. "But they won't find us. Not tonight." Neither of them slept much in the hours that followed. Dale kept his vigil, rifle across his knees, watching the darkness for any sign of the riders returning. Miriam huddled in her blanket, whispering prayers into the night. The creek muttered over stones nearby, and somewhere in the distance, a lone wolf called to the hidden moon. They waited out the long hours until the sky began to lighten in the east. Dawn revealed their breath in white puffs, frost coating the grass where dew had settled. Dale rose stiffly, his joints protesting the night spent on watch. "We need to move," he said quietly, helping Miriam to her feet. "They'll be back to check those tracks once it's light enough." Miriam nodded, her face pale but determined, as they quickly broke camp. The animals seemed to sense their urgency, standing quietly as Dale saddled them with efficient movements. Within minutes, they were moving again, taking a less traveled path that led deeper into the hills. The rising sun painted the mountain peaks in shades of gold and rose, but neither rider had attention to spare for the beauty. Their focus was on the trail ahead and the dangers that might be waiting. The fresh morning air carried the scent of pine and melting snow, along with the unspoken promise of more challenges to come. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the muddy main street of Thompson's Crossing as Dale guided their horse past weather-worn buildings. The small settlement, barely more than a dozen structures huddled against the mountainside, had served as his trading post in better times. Now it might offer them sanctuary, if only for a moment. The blacksmith's shop announced itself with the ring of hammer on anvil, smoke curling from its stone chimney. Dale reined in near the door, helping Miriam down from the saddle. Her legs wobbled after the long ride. "Sarah Miller's a good woman," Dale explained quietly, nodding toward the connected house. "She'll keep you safe while I see to some business." The blacksmith's wife appeared in her doorway, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. Recognition lit her weathered face. "Dale Boone? Land sakes, ain't seen you in near 6 months." "Much obliged if you'd watch over my young friend here, Sarah," Dale said, touching the brim of his hat. "Just for a spell." Sarah's kind eyes took in Miriam's borrowed coat and tired face. "Of course. Come in, child. I've got fresh bread cooling and my young ones would love some company." Miriam glanced uncertainly at Dale. He nodded reassurance. "I won't be long." Inside the Miller home, warmth from the cooking stove wrapped around Miriam like a blanket. 3 children looked up from their play by the hearth. The Pioha, oldest perhaps 10, the youngest barely walking. Sarah settled Miriam at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a thick slice of bread spread with preserves. "Rest yourself, dear," Sarah said. "You look half frozen." Dale left his mount at the smithy's rail and walked briskly toward the small church at the settlement's edge. The parsonage beside it was a modest cabin, smoke rising from its chimney. Dale knocked at the door, his knuckles rapping against worn wood. Reverend James Carraway opened it, surprise crossing his lean face. "Dale Boone?" The preacher's dark hair showed touches of gray at the temples, but his eyes remained sharp and kind. "This is unexpected." "Need your counsel, Reverend," Dale said quietly, "on a matter of some urgency." The preacher studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in, brother." Inside, Dale removed his hat, turning it in his hands as he chose his words. The parsonage was simply furnished, a desk piled with papers, bookshelves laden with well-worn volumes, a pot of coffee keeping warm on the potbelly stove. "What troubles you?" Carraway asked, pouring 2 cups of coffee. Dale accepted the cup, but didn't drink. "There's rifles being hidden up near Carson's mining camp, meant to cause trouble with the Ute people." He met the preacher's eyes. "Could spark a war if we don't stop it." Carraway's expression grew grave. "That's a serious claim. You're certain?" "Got it from one who saw with her own eyes. Girl named Miriam Rose. She's the reason I came. Her uncle's mixed up in it, along with others who wear badges." The preacher set his coffee aside, steepling his fingers. "If law enforcement is involved, this goes deeper than simple gun running." He shook his head. "Some would profit from conflict with the Ute. Land grabs, mining rights. There's money in it for the ruthless." "Figured as much," Dale said grimly. "Question is, what can we do?" "The truth must come to light," Carraway said firmly. "But we must move carefully. If lawmen are truly complicit, they'll stop at nothing to keep this quiet." He studied Dale thoughtfully. "You're risking much by bringing this forward." "Already risked plenty hiding the girl. Couldn't do different, seeing as how they mean to silence her." The preacher nodded slowly. "You did right, Dale. Though it may cost you." He rose and paced to his window, looking out at the gathering clouds. "I have some influence with the territorial governor. If we can document these weapons, prove their intended purpose." He turned back to Dale. "But first, we must keep the girl safe." Dale set his untouched coffee aside and stood. "Best get back to her. Left her with Sarah Miller." "Go carefully," Carraway warned. "Word travels fast in small towns. If anyone recognized her. Dale was already moving toward the door, worry spurring his steps. The walk back to the blacksmith's seemed longer, each face he passed a potential threat. But when he reached Sarah's kitchen, he found a scene of unexpected peace. Miriam sat surrounded by the Miller children, a piece of chalk in her hand as she drew letters on a small slate board. The youngest child watched in fascination as she formed each character, while the older ones copied her movements on scraps of paper. "This letter makes the sound B," she was explaining patiently, "like in bear or bread or brother." Her face glowed with quiet joy, transformed by the simple act of teaching. Dale paused in the doorway, struck by the sight. For a moment he could see the schoolteacher she dreamed of becoming, if she lived to see that dream fulfilled. The peaceful scene shattered as heavy boots thundered on the porch. Deputy Harlan Pike burst through the door, his hand resting meaningfully on his holstered revolver. The children scattered like startled quail. "Well, well," Pike drawled, his cold eyes fixed on Miriam. "What have we here?" He turned to Dale. "Mighty interesting, finding you traveling with this particular girl, Boone." Dale forced his stance to remain casual, though his muscles coiled for action. "My niece," he said evenly. "Come to stay with me a spell." "That so?" Pike's tone dripped disbelief. "Funny thing, I know this girl, and she ain't kin to you." "Her mama was my sister," Dale lied smoothly. "Dead these past 5 years. Miriam needed looking after, so here she is." Miriam had gone very still, her face pale but composed. Sarah Miller stood protectively near her, one hand on her shoulder. Pike's eyes narrowed. "You never mentioned no sister before." "Never had cause to." Dale met the deputy's gaze steadily. "Something you needed, lawman?" For a long moment, tension crackled in the kitchen. Then Pike forced a cold smile. "Just passing through, doing my duties." He touched his hat brim to Sarah. "Ma'am." His eyes lingered on Miriam before he turned and strode out. When his boots had faded from the porch, Sarah let out a shaky breath. "Lord have mercy, that man has ice where his heart should be." Dale moved to Miriam's side. "You all right?" She nodded, though her hands trembled. "He knows," she whispered. "He'll be back." "We need to move on," Dale said quietly. "Not tonight," Sarah insisted. "Storm's coming in. Stay here, we've room enough, and Tom won't mind." Dale started to refuse, but a rumble of thunder punctuated her words. Through the window, he could see dark clouds mounting over the peaks. That evening, after Sarah had fed them all and put her children to bed, Reverend Carraway appeared at the door. The preacher sat with Dale by the dying fire, while the women cleared supper dishes. "The deputy's presence concerns me," Carraway said softly. "He's not known for mercy." "Nor for following the law he claims to serve," Dale agreed. The preacher leaned forward, his face grave in the firelight. "What you're doing, protecting the girl, standing against this plot, it may cost you everything. Are you prepared for that?" Dale watched the flames dance lower. "Already. Lost everything once," he said quietly. "Maybe that's why the Lord sent her my way. Time to start caring again, even if it hurts." "It takes courage to stand against your neighbors for what's right," Carraway said. "But that's often what peace requires." He clasped Dale's shoulder. "You're not alone in this fight, brother. Remember that." The Reverend left them with a prayer for protection and a promise to help however he could. Dale watched through the window as he disappeared into the gathering dark, while behind him, Miriam's soft voice read Bible stories to Sarah's sleepy children. The storm broke over the settlement with sheets of rain and crackling lightning. But inside the Miller home, surrounded by the warmth of friendship and shared purpose, Dale felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope, fragile as a candle flame, but burning steady in the dark. The gray light of dawn crept over the mountains, painting the fresh snow with gentle fingers of rose and gold. Inside the Miller home, Dale methodically packed their saddlebags while Miriam wrapped thick slices of Sarah's hearthbread in clean cloth. "The Lord provides," Sarah whispered, pressing extra jerky and a water skin into Miriam's hands. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You stay safe now, child." Miriam hugged the blacksmith's wife tightly. "Thank you for everything," she murmured into Sarah's shoulder. "I'll never forget your kindness." Dale secured the last strap on his pack, his movements deliberate despite the urgency pressing at his shoulders. Every minute they delayed meant another chance for Pike to return with reinforcements. Yet rushing could prove just as dangerous in the treacherous morning light. 2 days' ride to Reverend Carraway's main church, Dale said quietly. "We'll find help there." Tom Miller appeared in the doorway, his smith's apron already dusted with coal. "Road's clear for now," he reported, "but best move quick. Pike was asking questions in town last night." Dale nodded grimly. He helped Miriam mount his steady bay mare while he took the pack mule's lead. The beast was laden with their supplies and what remained of Dale's winter pelts, resources they might need for the journey ahead. "God be with you," Sarah called softly as they rode out. The morning air bit sharp and clean, their breath frosting in pale clouds. Dale led them east, away from the settlement's scattered buildings. Fresh snow had fallen in the night, smoothing their tracks almost as soon as they made them. It might have been beautiful, if not for the tension riding their shoulders. Miriam sat straight in the saddle, her borrowed coat pulled tight. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked softly. "We'll make it," Dale assured her, though his hand stayed close to his rifle. "Just got to keep moving steady," and he broke off as movement caught his eye. Riders appearing through the trees ahead, spreading across the trail. Dale's heart sank as he counted 6 men, all armed, and there in the center, a familiar figure that made Miriam gasp. "Uncle Silas," she breathed. Silas rose, sat his horse with the loose confidence of a man who knew he held the winning hand. His face was flushed with more than just the morning cold, and his smile showed too many teeth. "There's my wayward niece," he called. "Been looking all over for you, girl." Dale shifted, placing himself between Miriam and the men. "She ain't going anywhere with you, Rose." "Now that's where you're wrong." Silas reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper. "Got here legal documents naming me as her guardian, signed by the judge himself." "Those papers are lies," Miriam cried. "You forged them, just like you forged the trading permits." "Hush now," Silas snapped, his false warmth vanishing. "Time to come home where you belong, before any more foolish stories get told." Dale's voice was steel. "She stays with me." Pike emerged from the group, rifle ready. "Step aside, Boone. This isn't your concern." "Make me." The words had barely left Dale's mouth when 2 riders flanked him. He swung the rifle up, but a 3rd man had circled behind. Pain exploded across the back of his head as a rifle butt struck him. Dale sprawled forward in the snow, stars bursting behind his eyes. "No!" Miriam screamed. "Leave him alone!" Through blurred vision, Dale saw her kick free of the stirrups, trying to run to him. But Pike caught her arm, yanking her roughly away. She fought like a wild thing, kicking and clawing. "Stop it!" Silas roared. He backhanded Miriam across the face, snapping her head back. "Ungrateful little witch, I'll teach you proper behavior yet." Dale struggled to rise, blood running hot down his neck. A boot caught him in the ribs, driving him back down. More kicks followed, pain bursting through his body. He could hear Miriam sobbing, calling his name. "Throw her on the horse," Silas ordered. "Time we got home and settled this marriage business proper. Found a fellow willing to pay good money to take her off my hands. Says he'll teach her some manners. Dale, Miriam's voice was desperate now. Please, help me. He managed to lift his head, catching a glimpse of her being thrown across a saddle despite her struggles. Pike tied her hands, while Silas watched with cruel satisfaction. Leave him, Silas commanded as his men mounted up. Cold will finish him soon enough. He urged his horse closer to where Dale lay. Should have minded your own business, Boone. Now you'll die out here alone, just like them Indians you used to hunt. The group rode away, Miriam's sobs fading into the distance. Dale lay in the bloodied snow, each breath sending daggers through his chest. The morning sun seemed to mock him with its beauty as consciousness wavered. Lord, he whispered through cracked lips, tasting copper. Don't let her be lost like the others. Please. Not like my family. Not again. The prayer fell into silence as the snow continued to fall, gentle and indifferent, covering the scarlet stains around him in a shroud of white. Darkness fell like a heavy blanket over the settlement, bringing with it a bone-deep cold that seemed to freeze the very air. Dale Boone stumbled through the gathering gloom, each step sending waves of agony through his battered body. The beating had left him barely able to walk, but the thought of Miriam in danger drove him forward like a man possessed. The parsonage's windows glowed warm against the night, a beacon of hope in the wilderness. Dale's vision swam as he climbed the 3 wooden steps to the door. His knuckles barely made contact before his strength gave out completely. He collapsed against the weathered boards, the world spinning around him. The door opened, spilling lamplight across his crumpled form. Good Lord! Reverend Carraway's voice seemed to come from very far away. Dale! Dale! Strong hands gripped his shoulders, pulling him inside. Dale tried to speak, but only managed a groan as the preacher helped him to a chair near the pot-bellied stove. They took her, he finally rasped. Rose and his men. They're going to... He couldn't finish the sentence. Stay still. The Reverend's calm voice cut through Dale's panic as he examined the wounds. You've got a nasty gash on your head, and these ribs... His gentle probing made Dale wince. They worked you over properly. Doesn't matter. Dale tried to rise but fell back, gasping. Have to go after them. The rifles. You'll do no one any good by killing yourself, Carraway said firmly. He retrieved his medical kit, beginning to clean the dried blood from Dale's face. The Lord didn't bring you this far to let you fail now. Failed already, Dale muttered. Just like I failed my family. Failed those native families we drove out. His voice broke. Should have protected her better. The night is darkest before dawn, the Reverend said, applying a poultice to Dale's head wound, and you're not in this fight alone. As if summoned by the words, a shadow appeared in the doorway. Dale's hand instinctively moved toward his missing gun before he registered who stood there. The Ute Scout was younger than Dale remembered, though his eyes held the weight of generations. He wore buckskins and carried himself with quiet dignity, studying Dale with an unreadable expression. Henry, Reverend Carraway said, thank you for coming. Dale's throat tightened as recognition hit him. He had faced this man across a battlefield years ago, when the army drove the Ute from their hunting grounds. The memory of burning lodges rose in his mind like smoke. You! Henry's voice was level, neither accusing nor forgiving. The soldier who let the women escape. Dale blinked in surprise. He remembered that day, breaking ranks to wave a group of Ute women and children toward safety, against orders. He hadn't known anyone had seen. I summoned Henry when you first told me about the rifles, Carraway explained. He's been watching Rose's activities for months. Henry moved into the lamplight, his moccasins silent on the wooden floor. Why should I trust you now, soldier? Dale met his gaze steadily. Because I'm not that man anymore. Because an innocent girl's life hangs in the balance. And because those rifles could spark a war that would destroy everything, your people and mine." A long moment passed as Henry considered this. Finally, he gave a slight nod. "The old ones say even a bent arrow can fly true, if aimed with a good heart." "We need to move quickly," Dale said, forcing himself to sit straighter despite the pain. "Rose plans to marry Miriam off. Sell her, really. And once those rifles are distributed—" "First light," Henry interrupted. "No good tracking in darkness. Rest now. Heal what you can." His lips quirked slightly. A wounded warrior is prey, not hunter. Reverend Caraway finished bandaging Dale's ribs. "Henry's right. We'll pray, and then you'll rest. All of us will need our strength." Dale started to protest, but the words died in his throat as the Reverend began to pray. The simple, heartfelt words filled the small room, binding the three unlikely allies together in common purpose. "Lord, guide us in this dark hour. Protect young Miriam from harm. Give us wisdom to prevent bloodshed and courage to face whatever comes. Amen." "Amen," Dale whispered. To his surprise, he heard Henry's quiet echo as well. The night passed slowly. Dale dozed fitfully in the chair, his dreams filled with Miriam's terrified face and the thunder of hoofbeats. Each time he woke, he found Henry keeping silent vigil by the window, as still as a shadow. The Reverend worked at his desk, writing letters to be sent if they failed, insurance that the truth would come out, one way or another. Dawn came with painful clarity, painting the eastern sky in shades of fire. Dale forced his battered body to move, each motion a study in controlled agony. His ribs protested as he strapped on the gun belt Caraway had retrieved from the blacksmith's, complete with his old Colt revolver. His hands shook slightly as he checked the loads, but his determination was iron. Henry appeared with 3 horses, already saddled. "The mining camp lies 2 hours north," he said. "Rose will not expect pursuit so soon." "He'll have men watching the approaches," Dale warned, easing himself carefully into the saddle. "That is why we go through the high passes." Henry's smile was sharp. "My people's paths, unknown to white men." Reverend Caraway mounted his own horse, a Bible secured in his saddlebag alongside medical supplies. The weight of his rifle seemed at odds with his collar, yet his face showed no conflict. "The Lord's work takes many forms," he said, noting Dale's glance. "Sometimes we must defend the innocent with more than words." Dale nodded, understanding. His own faith, so long buried under grief and guilt, felt raw and new, like spring grass pushing through melting snow. He offered up a silent prayer as they rode out, not for victory or vengeance, but for the strength to do what was right. The morning sun caught the silver cross at Caraway's throat, the metal gleaming like a star against his black coat. To their left, Henry guided his pony with the subtle grace of one born to the saddle, scanning the landscape with practiced eyes. And between them rode Dale Boone, no longer the lone trapper hiding from his past, but a man with purpose and perhaps redemption ahead. 3 men from 3 different worlds, united by a common cause. They rode north as the settlement stirred to life behind them, their horses' hooves striking sparks from the stony ground. Somewhere ahead lay Miriam, the hidden rifles, and the fate of peace in the territory. Dawn painted the mountains gold as they climbed toward the high passes, following Henry's lead into the unknown. Dale's hand brushed the worn grip of his Colt, steadier now despite the pain in his ribs. The weapon felt both familiar and strange, a remnant of his soldier days, but now turned to a different purpose. Not for war this time, but for justice. Not for destruction, but for protection. The sun rose higher as they rode, burning away the morning mist, revealing the path ahead one step at a time. The mountain trail twisted like a serpent through patches of melting snow. Henry rode ahead, his buckskin-clad form barely visible against the weathered rocks. Dale followed, each hoofbeat sending jolts of pain through his bruised ribs. Behind him, Reverend Caraway's black coat caught the wind like a crow's wings. "Tracks here," Henry called softly, reining his pony to a halt. He dismounted with fluid grace, crouching to study marks in the muddy earth. 2 wagons passed before dawn. One carried the girl. Dale's hands tightened on his reins. "You're certain?" Henry nodded, touching a small depression. "Small boot print. Female. She fought them here." He pointed to scuffed earth and broken twigs. They forced her back into the wagon. Pride and worry warred in Dale's chest. Miriam hadn't given up, despite everything. He remembered her quiet strength in his cabin, teaching him that courage wore many faces. "The mining camp lies 2 miles ahead," Reverend Caraway said, consulting a worn map. "Rose owns a saloon there, more of a shack with whiskey, truth be told." "Bad place," Henry agreed, remounting. "Bad men drink there. Watch for guards with rifles." They rode on, following Henry's lead through narrow passes where winter's grip still held. Dale's thoughts turned dark as storm clouds. His last real fight had left more than physical scars. The memory of violence, of what men could do to each other, haunted him still. But Miriam's face floated before him, her trust a light in his darkness. He couldn't fail her now. The sun wheeled overhead, shadows lengthening as they climbed. Henry halted them in a grove of wind-twisted pines just as the mining camp's first. Lanterns began to flicker in the valley below. They dismounted stiffly, muscles protesting the long ride. "There," Henry whispered, pointing to a ramshackle building on the camp's edge. 2 men with rifles paced outside, their boots crunching in old snow. "They keep her there." Dale studied the saloon through his field glasses. The structure looked ready to collapse in a strong wind. Raw lumber walls, a tin roof, windows clouded with grime. His heart clenched when he spotted movement behind one dirty pane. "Look," he breathed, passing the glasses to Caraway. "Upper window." A small hand pressed against the glass. As they watched, something scratched across the surface, deliberate strokes forming a crude cross. "Miriam," Dale whispered. "She's telling us she's there, that she hasn't given up hope." His throat tightened with emotion. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Caraway said softly, "even through a child's simple faith." They made camp in a hollow, sheltered from view. Henry built a small fire, while Caraway shared out jerky and hard bread. Dale barely tasted the food, his mind racing through possibilities, each more dangerous than the last. "We need a plan," he said finally, staring into the flames. "Those guards won't be the only ones. Rose will have more men inside." Henry nodded. "I counted 6 horses behind the saloon, maybe more hidden." "And the rifles?" Caraway asked. "We need proof of those to rally any help from honest townfolk." "Rose's men unloaded wagons at dawn," Henry said. "Took boxes to cave above camp." He sketched a rough map in the dirt with a stick. "Here, old mine entrance, blocked now. Good hiding place." Dale studied the crude drawing. "So we need to rescue Miriam and expose the rifles. Impossible to do both at once." "Not impossible," Henry said. "Difficult only." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I can draw guards away from saloon, make them think Ute raiders come. They will run to defend rifles first." Caraway leaned forward. "While they're distracted, Dale can slip inside for Miriam. I'll gather townsfolk. There are good people here who'll stand against violence if they see proof of Rose's plan." "It could work," Dale said slowly. "But the timing has to be perfect. And if anything goes wrong? He left the thought unfinished. Faith, brother, Caraway said quietly. Not just in God, but in each other. We three make an unlikely alliance, yet here we are. Henry stirred the fire with his stick. My people have a saying, even the smallest wolf can bring down the mighty elk if he runs with the pack. Dale looked at his companions, the Ute scout who had once been his enemy, the preacher who backed words with action. Something settled in his chest, replacing doubt with determination. We move at first light, he said. Henry, you'll need to circle wide, approach from the north where the Ute traditionally raided. Make enough noise to draw attention, but stay safe. Henry nodded. I know these hills. Better than Rose's men. They will chase shadows. I'll work my way down to town, Caraway added. There's a widow there who takes in washing. She'll spread word to gather folks quietly. When we hear your signal, Henry, I'll lead them up. And I'll get Miriam, Dale finished. God willing, we'll meet at the cave entrance with enough good witnesses to stop this powder keg from blowing. They spoke more of details as the fire burned low. Timing, signals, fallback plans if things went wrong. The night deepened around them, stars pricking through clouds while an owl called mournfully from the trees. Finally, they settled into their blankets, though Dale doubted any of them would truly sleep. He stared up at the stars, listening to the soft crunch of snow as Henry took first watch. From the valley came faint sounds of the mining camp, a drunk's off-key singing, the slam of a door, a dog's lonely bark. His ribs ached, and doubt tried to creep back in. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Miriam's cross scratched on the window, a simple act of faith that cut through his fears like sunlight through storm clouds. Whatever came with dawn, they would face it together. The fire died to embers, leaving only the quiet sounds of 3 men breathing in the mountain night, each carrying his own burden of hope and fear toward morning. Dawn crept over the mountains with teeth of ice. The bitter cold painted frost across bare branches and crusted the edges of Dale's beard as he crouched behind a fallen pine. His breath formed white clouds in the gray light, while he watched Henry's signal fire bloom against the pallid sky. Thick smoke rose in careful patterns from the northern ridge. 3 puffs, then 2, then 3 again. Henry had explained it was an old warning signal, one that would draw immediate attention from anyone fearful of Ute raids. Dale's hands tightened on his rifle as he counted heartbeats, waiting. The effect was immediate. 2 guards outside the saloon shack snapped to attention, rifles raised. They conferred briefly, gesturing at the smoke signals. When a 3rd column of smoke rose, darker than the others, they set off at a run toward the northern slope. Lord, guide our steps, Dale whispered, remembering Reverend Caraway's prayer from earlier. He moved forward, keeping low, using patches of scrub pine for cover. His ribs protested each movement, but he forced the pain aside. 20 yards to the shack. 15. 10. The wooden walls loomed before him, weathered boards gap-toothed and gray. Dale pressed his back against the rough surface, listening. Inside, he heard the scrape of boots on floorboards and what might have been muffled crying. A quick glance through a grimy window showed him the main room, empty save for scattered chairs and tables sticky with spilled whiskey. Dale eased around to the back door, tested the latch. Locked, but the wood around it was soft with rot. 3 sharp shoulders, and the door splintered inward. Dale slipped inside, rifle ready. The back room stank of tobacco and unwashed bodies. Miriam lay bound on a narrow cot, wrists and ankles tied with rough rope. A dirty cloth gagged her mouth. Her eyes went wide when she saw him. She made a muffled sound that might have been his name. Shh, Dale whispered, moving to her side. "I'm here now." His fingers worked at the knots binding her wrists. "Henry and the Reverend are helping. We're getting you out." Miriam shook her head frantically, trying to speak through the gag. When Dale pulled it free, she pressed something cold and hard into his palm. A knife, small but sharp. "Hidden in my skirts," she whispered. "Uncle never thought to check." Dale's heart swelled with pride even as his hands moved faster with the blade. "Clever girl," he murmured. "Hold still now." The last rope parted. Miriam sat up, rubbing circulation back into her wrists. "Dale, behind!" The warning came too late. Heavy boots thundered on the floor behind them. "Well, ain't this touching?" Silas Rose's voice drawled. Dale turned slowly. Rose filled the doorway, shotgun leveled at Dale's chest. The traitor's face was flushed with whiskey and rage, his eyes bloodshot. "Figured someone might try something," Rose said, "when I saw them guards running off like scared rabbits." He spat tobacco juice onto the floor. "Should have known it'd be you, Boone. Always sticking your nose where it don't belong." "It's over, Rose," Dale said evenly. "The Reverend's bringing townsfolk up right now. They'll find those rifles you've hidden." Rose's face twisted. "Ain't nothing over till I say it is." He jerked the shotgun. "Get away from the girl. She's my property, legal and proper." "She's a child of God," Dale said. "Not property, not something to be sold or traded." Fine words from a man about to die. Rose's finger tightened on the trigger. Miriam moved like lightning. She kicked hard at a table beside the cot, sending a lit kerosene lantern flying. It shattered against the wall in a spray of glass and flame. Rose instinctively turned toward the sound and fire. Dale lunged. The shotgun roared, pellets tearing through the space where he'd stood a heartbeat before. Then he crashed into Rose, driving them both against the doorframe. They grappled furiously, the traitor's bulk against Dale's desperate strength. The knife. Dale still held Miriam's knife. He drove it hard into Rose's shoulder. The traitor howled, releasing the shotgun. It clattered to the floor as flames began climbing the walls, feeding on decades of spilled whiskey and dry wood. Rose swung a meaty fist, catching Dale in his injured ribs. Pain exploded through him. He staggered but kept his feet, blocking another wild punch. The smoke was getting thicker, making it hard to breathe. "Dale!" Miriam's voice cut through the chaos. She had grabbed the fallen shotgun, holding it awkwardly but determined. Rose laughed, an ugly sound. "You ain't got the spine to use that, girl." "No," Miriam agreed quietly. "But I can do this." She swung the shotgun's heavy stock like a club, catching her uncle behind the knees. He went down hard. Dale didn't waste the opportunity. He drove his fist into Rose's jaw, putting every ounce of strength behind it. The traitor's head snapped back and he went limp. "Come on!" Dale grabbed Miriam's hand. Flames were spreading fast now, turning the shack into an inferno. They stumbled through thick smoke toward the door. The cold air hit them like a slap as they burst outside. Dale dragged Miriam several yards through the snow before letting them collapse. They lay there gasping as the shack burned behind them, the heat of it melting snow for yards around. Shouts rang out from the direction of the old mine. Dale looked up to see a crowd approaching, townsfolk led by Reverend Caraway, Henry riding beside them. The Ute Scout had done his part well. "The rifles!" Miriam wheezed, still catching her breath. "Did they find them?" "See for yourself," Dale said, helping her stand. They joined the gathering crowd at the mine entrance. Inside, stack upon stack of wooden crates lay exposed, each marked with clear army seals. Men were prying them open, revealing rows of new rifles packed in straw. "These were meant for the army," someone said. "Stolen shipment, has to be." "Meant to arm both sides," Henry added quietly. Start war between my people and yours. Much profit in war, for men with no honor." Reverend Caraway stood before the crowd, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air. "Let us pray," he said. "Not just for justice to be done, but for healing between peoples, for an end to violence born of greed and hate." Heads bowed. Even those who rarely attended church fell silent as the Reverend's words rolled over them. Miriam slipped her small hand into Dale's larger one, and he felt tears sting his eyes at the simple trust of it. A crash behind them announced the final collapse of the burning shack. Someone had pulled Rose's unconscious form to safety, though he lay under guard now. The fire would not spread. Too much snow still lay on the ground. But Dale thought perhaps something else might spread instead. Understanding, born from this strange morning's work. He looked at his unlikely allies, Henry standing tall and dignified, the Reverend earnest in prayer, Miriam brave despite all she'd endured. Something that felt very much like hope bloomed in his chest, warming him better than any fire could. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the mining camp as chaos erupted. Silas Rose, now conscious and restrained by two townsmen, thrashed against their grip. His face was red with fury as he shouted accusations. "Boone kidnapped my niece," he bellowed, spittle flying from his lips. "He's the criminal here. That girl's my legal ward, and he stole her away." Dale kept one protective arm around Miriam's shoulders as the crowd pressed closer. Some faces showed doubt, others anger. The air crackled with tension like the moments before a storm breaks. But Reverend Caraway's clear voice cut through the noise. "Before judgment is passed," he called out, "let all witness what the Lord has brought to light this day." He gestured toward the mine entrance where Henry stood guard over the opened crates. The Reverend's words drew the townsfolk forward. They gathered in a rough circle, muttering as they peered at the rifle crates. Dale noticed how their expressions shifted from curiosity to shock as they read the army seals and shipping marks. "These weapons," Henry said, his voice steady and dignified, "were meant to spark war between my people and yours." He lifted one of the new rifles, letting sunlight glint off its oiled barrel. "Many would have died, women, children, elders who seek only peace." A heavy silence fell. Even the wind seemed to still as Henry's words sank in. Dale felt Miriam straighten beside him, gathering her courage. "I saw them," she said, her voice small at first but growing stronger. She stepped forward, though her hand remained locked in Dale's. "I saw my uncle and Deputy Pike bury these crates 3 nights ago." All eyes turned to her. She lifted her chin, refusing to shrink from their stares. "They didn't know I was watching," Miriam continued. "They talked about selling them to both sides, to settlers claiming Indian raids, and to warriors told the army was coming." Her clear young voice carried across the hushed crowd. They laughed about the profit they'd make from the bloodshed. Deputy Pike, who had been hanging back at the edge of the gathering, suddenly shouted, "She's lying! You can't trust a hysterical girl!" But the damage was done. Townsfolk who had known Miriam since childhood saw the truth in her steady gaze. They remembered her as a quiet, honest child who never caused trouble until she fled her uncle's abuse. "The girl speaks truth," Henry added. "These are army rifles, stolen from a supply train 2 weeks ago. My people reported the theft, but no one listened." Rose had been growing more agitated as his scheme unraveled. With a roar of rage, he suddenly wrenched free from his captors. He lunged toward Miriam, hands curved like claws. Dale moved without thinking. He stepped in front of Miriam and met Rose's charge with a solid punch to the jaw. The traitor staggered but kept coming. They grappled briefly until Dale managed to twist Rose's arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees in the snow. "Enough," Dale said firmly, though his ribs screamed in protest. "It's finished, Rose. The deputy tried to slip away in the commotion, but Henry's sharp whistle brought several townsmen to block his path. They seized his arms, removing his gun belt despite his protests about his authority. "The law serves justice," Reverend Caraway declared, "not those who would twist it for profit." He turned to the gathered crowd. "Who among you will stand as witnesses to what we've uncovered here?" Hands raised throughout the crowd. The blacksmith and his wife stepped forward first, followed by the general store owner and several ranchers. Even the saloon keeper, who had often shared drinks with Rose, nodded grimly. "Then let these men be held until proper authorities arrive," the Reverend said. "The rifles must be secured as evidence." Under his direction, townsmen began carefully repacking the weapons. They hitched teams of horses to wagons, preparing to transport the crates to the church storehouse. Dale watched as Rose and the deputy were bound and loaded into a separate wagon for the jail in the larger town down valley. Throughout the activity, Miriam stayed close to Dale's side. He could feel her trembling, though her face remained composed. When the last rifle was safely stowed, she finally allowed herself to lean against him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me, for coming back." Dale's throat tightened with emotion. "You're the brave one," he said softly. "Standing up like that, telling the truth when it mattered most." The wagon train began moving out, creaking through the snow. Dale watched the rifles being carried away, the same weapons that might have caused such heartache and loss. His lips moved in silent prayer, thanking God that war had been prevented, that hatred had not won this day. Henry approached them as the last wagon departed. "You have done my people a great service," he said solemnly. "Both of you." "We all did," Dale replied. "Together." The Reverend joined them, his eyes bright with unshed tears of relief. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he said, "bringing truth to light through the courage of a child, healing old wounds through shared purpose." Miriam ducked her head at the praise, but Dale saw her small smile. The morning sun had fully cleared the mountain peaks now, touching the snow with golden light. Where the wagons had passed, their tracks marked a clear path forward, away from secrets and fear, toward justice and hope. The last echoes of the wagons faded into distance. Dale gazed at the empty mine entrance where such dangerous cargo had been hidden. So much harm had been prevented by one girl's bravery, one moment of choosing right over easy silence. His whispered thanks rose like steam in the cold air. "Lord, you turned darkness to light this day." Warm spring breezes whispered through the valley, melting snow into rivulets that trickled down the mountainsides. Inside the parsonage, Dale sat in a worn leather chair by the window, watching nature's slow awakening. His ribs still ached, but the sharp pain had faded to a dull throb. The doctor had assured him the bones would knit cleanly, given time and rest. From the kitchen came the cheerful sound of women's voices and children's laughter. The preacher's wife, Sarah Caraway, was teaching Miriam to bake bread. The rich smell of yeast and flour drifted through the house, mingling with wood smoke from the hearth. No, like this," Sarah's warm voice instructed. "Fold it over, then push with the heels of your hands." "Oh," Miriam exclaimed, "I see now. The dough feels alive under my fingers." Dale smiled at the joy in her tone. These past days had transformed her. Gone was the frightened girl who had collapsed at his cabin door. In her place bloomed a young woman full of quiet purpose. The Caraways' 3 children crowded around the kitchen table, pestering Miriam with questions as she worked. The youngest, 6-year-old Mary, was especially devoted to her new friend. "Miss Miriam," Mary piped up, "will you read us another story later?" "Of course, dear heart," Miriam replied. "After the bread is done." Dale's chest tightened with emotion. He had seen how naturally Miriam took to teaching. Each afternoon, she gathered the children in the parlor, helping them with letters and sums. Their eager faces and her patient guidance spoke of her true calling. A shadow fell across the windowsill. Dale looked up to find Henry standing there, his expression thoughtful. "May I join you?" the Ute Scout asked. Dale gestured to the chair opposite. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the domestic sounds from the kitchen. "I owe you words long overdue," Dale finally said, his voice rough. "For what happened in the war, for the homes we burned, the families we drove out. I was wrong, following those orders. The guilt has haunted me these many years." Henry studied him, dark eyes unreadable. "The past is like winter snow," he said slowly. "It cannot be unmelted, but spring brings new growth." He gestured toward the kitchen. "You chose differently this time. You protected the innocent, prevented bloodshed. These actions speak louder than old regrets." Dale bowed his head, humbled by the other man's wisdom and grace. "Thank you," he whispered. Their quiet conversation was interrupted by Reverend Caraway's arrival. The preacher stomped snow from his boots, his face brightening at the smell of baking bread. "News from town," he announced. "Silas Rose will stand trial next week. The army recovered most of the stolen rifles." His expression darkened slightly. "Though Deputy Pike has vanished, rode out before he could be properly charged." Dale frowned but kept his peace. The corrupt deputy's escape was troubling, but for now the immediate danger had passed. Peace, though fragile, had been preserved. Evening drew in, painting the parlor golden with lamplight. After supper they gathered by the hearth, the Caraways, Dale, Henry, and Miriam. The children begged for stories until their mother shooed them off to bed. In the quiet that followed, Miriam moved to sit beside Dale's chair. Her face was soft in the firelight as she looked up at him. "I never properly thanked you," she said softly, "for that first night when you found me in the snow, for keeping me safe after." Dale shook his head. "No thanks needed, child." "But there is," she insisted. "You listened when I begged you not to. Talk. You kept my secret until I was ready to tell it. That trust." Her voice caught. "That's why I'm still here. Why we all are." Dale's eyes grew wet as he remembered that desperate night, the terrified girl who had trusted him with her life. Now she sat beside him, whole and healing, her future bright with possibility. "Now we can speak hope again," he replied gruffly, laying a gentle hand on her shoulder. Miriam smiled, the expression transforming her face. In that moment, Dale saw clearly how far they had both come, from silence born of fear to words that brought healing, from isolation to family, found in the most unexpected places. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, spring continued its quiet work of renewal, melting winter's grip from the land. Inside, in the warm circle of lamplight, new bonds of trust and love grew stronger with each passing day. Spring painted the Colorado highlands in delicate shades of green and gold. Warm breezes carried the scent of wildflowers, and meadowlarks trilled their morning songs. Dale Boone stood on his cabin's newly repaired porch, surveying the work of many hands. The old boards had been replaced with fresh-cut pine, sturdy and sweet-smelling. Henry and several men from town had helped him shore up the roof, while others brought supplies and shared meals during the work. Even the blacksmith had contributed new hinges for the door, refusing payment with a gruff wave. Inside, the cabin bore little resemblance to the sparse shelter it had been just months ago. Cheerful curtains, sewn by Sarah Caraway, framed the windows. A colorful quilt, a gift from the ladies' sewing circle, brightened the bed. Small touches of civilization had crept in. A proper bookshelf, a rocking chair, even a rag rug by the hearth. Dale ran his hand along the smooth windowsill, remembering how alone he had been before that snowy night when Miriam appeared. Now, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple, he waited for her final visit before she left for school. The sound of wagon wheels drew his attention. Miriam sat beside Reverend Caraway, her face bright with anticipation. She had grown stronger these past months, though she would always be slight of build. But it was her spirit that had truly blossomed, nurtured by the love of her new guardians and the promise of education ahead. "Evening, Dale," the Reverend called, helping Miriam down. "We'll be back at first light tomorrow." Dale nodded, throat tight as Miriam hurried up the steps. She carried a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "I brought ingredients," she announced, "for a proper supper, like you gave me that first night." Together they prepared a simple meal: rabbit stew with dumplings, cornbread, and dried apple pie. Dale marveled at how naturally they moved around each other in the small space, a dance learned through shared trials and trust. As darkness settled, they sat by lamplight at the rough-hewn table. Dale had polished the tin plates until they gleamed, and found 2 matching cups for coffee. Real coffee, not chicory. "The school mistress wrote that I can start teaching the younger children right away," Miriam said, breaking off a piece of cornbread. "While I study my own lessons?" "You'll do fine," Dale assured her. "Got away with little ones, I've seen it." She smiled, then reached for her bundle. "I have something for you." She unwrapped a leather-bound journal and a packet of writing paper. "So you can write to me, and I promise to send a letter every week." Dale touched the journal's smooth cover, remembering how long it had been since he'd put pen to paper. "Much obliged," he said gruffly, "though my handwriting ain't what it should be." "It doesn't matter," Miriam replied. "Just knowing you're there, reading my words, that's what counts." They talked quietly as the lamp burned low, sharing memories of their time together. The terror of those first days seemed distant now, transformed by God's grace into something precious. "I was so afraid," Miriam admitted, "but you showed me what real protection means. Not control or cruelty, but love." Dale blinked hard, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, he said, "You showed me something too, child. That trust ain't foolish. That hope's worth the risk." They fell silent, listening to the crackling fire and the night sounds drifting through the open window. Peace settled around them like a familiar blanket. Morning came too soon, painting the eastern sky in streaks of rose and gold. The Reverend's wagon creaked up the trail just as dawn broke fully. Miriam gathered her few belongings, pausing in the doorway. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging Dale fiercely, "for everything." He held her close, this child who had become like a daughter to his wounded heart. "God keep you safe," he murmured. She climbed into the wagon, settling beside Sarah Caraway, who had come to accompany her. As they started down the trail, Miriam turned, waving until the wagon disappeared around the bend. Dale stood on his porch, watching long after they were gone. The morning sun warmed his face, and for the first time in years, he felt no need to hide from its light. His soul, so long frozen in grief, had thawed in the presence of love. He lifted his face to the sky, words of gratitude rising naturally to his lips. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered, "for sending her, for giving me back my heart." The prayer floated up with the morning mist, carrying with it the last shadows of his solitude. He was no longer the cursed recluse, hiding from his past in these mountains. God had transformed him into something new, a protector, a friend, a father figure to a brave young girl. Around him, spring continued its work of renewal. New grass pushed through melting snow, and birds called from budding branches. Dale smiled, touching the journal in his pocket. He had letters to write, a family to love, and hope to guide his days ahead. Thanks for tuning in. These stories remind us that life is more than headlines. It's about heartlines. Subscribe if you want more moments that make you pause, feel, and reflect.